Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Benjamin Karst. I'm going to start the webinar. Just before we get things started, there's a couple of things to note. Make sure that you've got your sound turned on so that you can hear everything correctly. And if you want to ask any questions throughout the webinar, you can ask them through the chat window that you should see in your application. We will send you a cheat sheet and the example spreadsheet after the course, and there will be a recording over the entire webinar as well. So if you have any details, anything that you missed afterwards, you can look at that again and pause the webinar and then just go through these examples more slowly. If you have any questions at any point, just let us know. Just mention the question in the chat window, like I say, and I'll get back to you. The course topic today is called how Excel deals with yes or no. Are you in or out? What we mean by that is we'll give you a small introduction into Boolean logic. Boolean logic sounds like quite a complicated topic, and it does have very wide applications and can be very, very tricky at a high level, but it's just an introduction today, so we'll go into details exactly what we mean by that, how that works, and give you an overview so that you can deal with that in the future. We'll look at some basic Boolean algebra in Excel, and we'll look at how to use Boolean algebra for comparisons. And how we can use this topic to reduce risk and create quality controls with this topic that we're learning today. So it's a very useful topic. Like I say, there are many more applications than what we'll talk about today, but it's just a small introduction to get you started. Just before we start as well, our company, Woodthorpe IT Solutions, we provide customized courses all across the UK. So if you like what you're seeing today, you can get us back. We can come on site. So wherever you are in the UK, we can come on site and provide our own laptops. We can give you, customized courses, beginners, intermediate, or advanced courses as well. So whatever you need, you can, just let us know. There's just a question there saying that it's breaking up a little bit. Is everyone okay to hear my voice at the moment, or is anyone having sound issues? Maybe it's just on your computer. So I think Mandy Wild is asking whether it's coming through clearly. Are other people having problems as well, or is it just for Mandy? Cool, thanks so much. Yeah, I think it's a couple of people. Like everyone seems to be okay. So Mandy, it might just be some problems on your end. So you might have to play with the sound settings. But yeah, thanks everyone for confirming that. Like I say, you can call us back. If you're having any questions on the back of the course today, and if you want any customized courses, just let us know, and we'll provide that for you. We can provide courses on all of the applications that you're seeing on the screen at the moment. It's Access, Excel, Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, pretty much most of the Microsoft applications we can provide courses on. So we've got specialized trainers, and we can send them out to you if you need help on any of these applications. So what is Boolean logic? Boolean logic is essentially a form of algebra where all the values in maths are reduced to either true or false, and we can denote true as 1 or false as 0. So whenever you see true, it's essentially the equivalent to 1, and whenever you see false, it's the equivalent to 0. And we'll look later on as to why that is useful, why that is being done at all. But that's the essence of it, reducing maths to these two values. You sometimes hear it called as binary logic. That's exactly the same thing. So don't get confused by terminology if you hear either or. The topic is named after George Boole, who was the mathematician that came up with this type of logic initially, and it's essentially there to test basic statements and check whether they're correct or not correct. So on the screen at the moment, you've got some example which says today is Tuesday, and then there's a second statement which says today is not Tuesday. and only one of these statements can be true. So, if today's Tuesday, then and that statement is correct, then the other one has to be false. So they're mutually exclusive. Only one of them can be true. That might not sound very exciting, but it's a very, very important topic, and it sits at the core of Excel as well as most topics in computer science. So if you understand this well today, then there's a lot of things that you can manipulate at quite a basic level. Brilliant. What we're gonna do, if you're happy with that, we're just gonna look at some very basic examples in Excel to get things started. Like I say, there might be some topics in these examples today when we're going over it where you might not know the functions or the specific symbols that I'm clicking or using. So this area is obviously specific about Boolean functions today. If there's some Excel functions coming up, you might want to go into one of these other courses that we're providing, but we'll just get things started with some very basic examples. So what you see here in this example one tab that I've got up in my Excel spreadsheet is we've got some very basic data. So you can see I've got a character A, I've got the character A again, then the character B, C, then I've got two numbers 1 and 2, and what we're doing subsequently is we're testing these values in different ways, whether they're the same, whether they're not the same, whether they're greater than the other, and so on. Anytime you want to use Boolean logic in Excel, you can essentially use any of these operators that you see on the screen. So most people are very happy with the equal sign, maybe the smaller sign and the greater sign as well. But very few people know that there are other signs that you can use as well. For instance, if you put in a smaller and an equal sign, it means smaller than or equal to at the same time. So if you put both of them put together, that's what they mean. And you can use them in any of these operations that we're talking about just now, as well as more complex functions. And then similarly, greater and equal sign means greater than and equal to at the same time. If you put in smaller or greater to at the same time, then what that means is it's not equal to something. So again, a lot of people aren't aware that these exist. Most people just use the equal sign all the time. But depending on what your question is, what your problem is that you're analyzing, any of these can be very, very useful. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do some basic examples. You can see on the screen, if I click on my first test example, it says A3 is equal to A4. So that's the test. That's what we're trying to find out. We're making a statement that says the value in A3, which is the character A, is the same as the value in A4, which is also the character A. So in this example, since we're making a statement that is correct, since both of these values are A, when I click enter, it says true. So automatically Excel will spit out true whenever you're testing for something that is indeed correct. However, if we're doing something like this, where it's saying A3 is smaller than A4, so we're testing whether the character A is smaller than the character A, then it's saying false because that is not the case, because they're in fact the same. So you can see very clearly that Excel can do these very, very basic statements and distinguish between statements that are correct, statements that are incorrect, and you might not see how this is immediately useful, but you'll come across a lot of situations in your company, in your daily life, where that is the fundamental thing that we want to test. We want to compare different things and find out whether they're true. You might have something from a customer, and you want to see a database from your customer. You want to see whether the order numbers are exactly the same as yours. So you could use one of these tests, or you might want to compare yesterday's data and to today's data and see if it's exactly the same or if something has changed in the meantime. Sometimes people want to test the exact opposite. They might want to test if something is not the same. So you might have a process where every day you're coming in and you're changing the date, the current date, to make sure that you're looking at the most current spreadsheet. So you might want to check whether you've correctly entered the today's date. So you might check if today's date is not the same as yesterday's date, in which case you've correctly updated it. So what you have seen here is you can check whether A is equal to the character A. It might surprise you that we can even, when we're dealing with normal characters, that we can use these comparisons at all. because smaller than, greater than, that really seems to be something that we're just doing with numbers. But what we've got here, and this might surprise you, is it's saying A5 is greater than A4, so B is greater than A, and it actually says true. So the fact that this works at all might surprise you, but you can actually use these greater than or equal to, and so on signs with numbers as well as characters. If you're using it with characters or entire sentences, then what Excel will do is it will compare whether the character is like later in the alphabet compared to the other character. So in this case, if I'm saying A5, so B is greater than A4, then that is indeed correct, because B, is later on in the alphabet when you're comparing it to the character A. So this is the basis of how that works. Like I say, you can use smaller than, greater than. You can use not equal to. So we're saying, in this case, is C A6, is it not equal to A5 B, which is a true statement again, and so on. You can use this with numbers. You can use smaller than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So any of these operators that you see on the screen, are the essence of what we're using to do some very basic comparisons, and you can hopefully see a lot of applications immediately, how you can use these very simple formulas to check something, to control something. A lot of people do this in their job, but they use very, very complicated formulas to get to the same answer. So hopefully this will make your life a little bit easier just knowing this. Like I say, this is just our basis, but you use this in almost any formula in Excel. It's the fundamental aspect of how formulas are built. The standard function that people use, where this is fundamental, is the if function. So you might have seen the if function before. The if function basically tests again whether something is true or whether something is false, and then based on that test, it will then give you one value if the condition is true, and another value if the condition is false. So in this case, what you can see here is I'm saying if the statement if in C3 is true. So what we checked earlier was whether the first two values are the same, which was indeed the case. Then I'm printing out on the screen that the first two letters are the same. So that's the sentence that I'm writing out. If that's not the case, then I'm just going to write nothing. So that's what the if statement says. It based on whether something is true or false, I'm going to write out one thing or another. So in this case, you can see it's saying that the first two letters are the same because that value is true. If, however, I change, something in here, if I type anything else in there, you can see the test then becomes false because those two entries are no longer the same, and subsequently my if formula no longer works because we've now done something that is false in terms of the overall statement. So what we can then do once you've understood the very basis of that, like I say, it's a complicated topic when you're going into more details. But just to get things started, what we can do, we can not only do one statement at a time, we can actually check whether multiple things are true or false at the same time. And this is where these truth tables come in. So if we're just checking for two conditions at a time, then we've got several additional formulas that we can use to combine any of these statements in any way that we want. For instance, the AND formula combines two statements, and it says only if both of these statements are correct at the same time, that's when the overall value is going to be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. The OR function says if at least one of them is true, then the overall value is going to be true. Otherwise, it's false. So that might seem a bit abstract, but just to make an example, AND would be something like if today is Sunday and the weather is nice, then I'm going for a walk, for instance. So I'm only going for a walk if it's Sunday and if the weather is nice at the same time. If it's Sunday and it's raining, then I'm not going for a walk. If it's Monday and it's sunny, then I can't go for a walk because I'm at work. So and is basically connecting two statements and saying only if both of these statements are true at the same time, that's when I'm doing the subsequent condition. Or like I say, is giving you a choice. So it's saying if at least one of them are true, then the overall statement becomes true. So if it's Sunday or if it's Saturday, then I'm going for a walk because both days are weekend days, so I'm not working on both days. So OR gives you a choice between two XOR is an exclusive OR. What that means is it gives you an either or type of scenario. So it means if one of them is true, then the overall statement will be true. But if both of them are true or both of them are false, then it's not. Then it's going to be false overall. So these are statements where you can have one true statement, but not two true statements at the same time. For instance, if you flip a coin, then you can have tails, you can have heads, but you can't have heads and tails at the same time. So if you would make a statement such as after flipping the coin, I received heads and tails at the same time, then that would be false because it's a scenario where you can have either or, but not both at the same time, if that makes sense. And then the not function is a bit of a side note. You can use this to turn any statement into the opposite value. So if you have a statement that is true and you put a not function around it, then that's going to make it false. If you have a statement that is false and you put a not function around it, then that's going to make it true. So it gives you the exact opposite of what you would normally see on the screen. So what we've got here as a small example, again, where you might be using this in your company, is you can use this to any sort of conditions that you're setting, anything from the prior example that we have had. You can use multiple of these statements to then connect it and see whether your overall comparison is true, whether your overall check is correct, whether your control is working in general by connecting multiple statements one at a time. So what we've got here, for instance, is we've got a sort of product, a certain product which can be approved or maybe not approved. And then we've got a test, and this test can be completed or not completed, for instance. So just as a very basic example, you might be a manager making a decision whether to start a marketing campaign or not. And you might want to start this marketing campaign based on the fact that the product has to be approved and the test has to become completed. So only if both of these stages are met, if the product is approved and if the test is completed, only then will you start the marketing campaign. Otherwise, you won't start it, essentially. So you can see here, in this case, the product is indeed approved and the test is indeed completed. So we want to say start the marketing campaign, which it says here. But what we've done here is we've done a very basic if function again. So we've used this if function form previously, but rather than just basing it on one test like we did earlier, we're now testing whether A11, so the value in A11 says approved, and whether the value in A13 says completed. And we're using that within an AND statement. So what we're saying is both of these conditions have to be met at the same time. It has to be approved and completed for us to start the marketing campaign. Otherwise, we're going to print nothing on the screen. What that then means is at the moment it's saying start marketing campaign because both of these conditions are correct. But if I just change one of these conditions, if I just say not approved in here, for instance, then you can see it just disappears because both of them have to be met at the same time. So you can't just remove one of these conditions. It'll only do what you've told it to do once every single condition in the AND function is met. If you're using an OR function instead, then the OR function will essentially say, if at least one of these conditions are met, then I'm going to start the marketing campaign. So what we've got here is, again, the same exact scenario, but this time we're putting in an OR function. So we're saying if the product is approved or if it's completed. So either one of these conditions is fine for us to start the marketing campaign. So obviously, if both of them are working, then it's going to say start marketing campaign. If one of them changes but the other one is still true, then you can see the AND function disappears, but the OR function is still there. So the OR function will work either way. Only if both of them are not true. If both of them are false, only then will the OR function disappear as well, like from the screen here, because this time we have everything as false rather than at least one of them being true. So that's generally how it works. And again, we'll see some examples later on how we can apply this a bit more specifically. But this is, like I say, really at the core of most of the functions that you might encounter in Excel. And it can be really useful, especially if you're doing these type of if statements a lot, to connect multiple statements at the same time. A quick side note as well, we won't spend too much time on this, but just to show you that these logical values, these Boolean functions that you're receiving in Excel, they're essentially a different type of data. Like I said earlier, you can have true, you can have false, or you can have the number 1 or the number 0. True and 1 means the same thing, false and 0 means the same thing. But these, like true and false, are essentially a different type of data. So you might know this, but there's a lot of different functions in Excel that use just numbers, and you have to normally distinguish between numbers and text. So if you have just a number in Excel, then you have to put, then the moment you enter the number, Excel puts it onto the right-hand side because it understands that you're wanting to maybe calculate something with it, or you want to add, multiply, divide, anything like that. It can only do to numbers. Then every time you're putting any word into any cell, Excel puts it to the left-hand side because it understands it as text. So this is where you can do things like capitalize the words, extract certain pieces of information. So numbers and text are fundamentally different data types in Excel. And what we also have, but again, most people don't know this, is this true and false business, which is a complete separate data type again. So when you're entering the word true into any cell, or the word false, then Excel recognizes that as a complete different entry. So if I just type in true in any cell, you can see it immediately puts that into the middle, and it capitalizes that to let you know that it's neither a number nor a text. It's a different type of data. So that's just a side note to show you how that works. And again, even so, this is a word, Excel actually does recognize that as the number 1, so it's equivalent as the number 1. So if I do some very basic math with this, if I say something like true plus 1, you can see it's going to give me the number 2, because true is essentially equivalent to the number 1. So I can add, I can subtract, I can do anything with this, even so it looks a bit strange. True is the same as 1, false is the same as 0. So this is generally how that works. And this is how you can identify these type of data in your spreadsheet. This tab looks a little bit complicated. Like I said, you're going to get this after the webinar, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It's just a side note to let you know that you can convert between these. Sometimes it's easier, or it's better to use true and false in certain functions, so the actual words true and false, the data type we've just seen. Or sometimes you want to actually use the values 1 and 0. So like I say, these are equivalent in most scenarios, but there are situations when it's better to use the one or the other. So there are lots and lots of different ways to convert between true and false, and 1 and 0, or between 1 and 0 and true and false. So for instance, you've got a table with true and false entries here, and then in the first one it says minus minus, and then just the data type that you're getting in here. So minus minus A3 would be minus minus true. And as strange as that sounds, that converts the word true into a number 1, because you're taking the negative of true, which is equivalent to 1, and then you're taking another negative of that, so a double negative becomes a positive again. So you're essentially leaving the number as it is, but just doing that forces Excel to do some math and essentially convert true to a 1 or false to a 0. And you can see there's lots and lots of other ways to do that. This list isn't exclusive. There are many more ways to convert between some logical values and functions, and like values, and vice versa. So like I say, you're going to get this example tab after the webinar, but it's just to give you the basic idea between converting between one thing and another. The reason this is sometimes necessary, and I'll just quickly demonstrate this in this tab, is that when you have different logical values, like in this example, you've got false and 0, and then true and 1. Like I say, these should really be equivalent. False and 0 is the same thing, true and 1 is the same thing. But there are some functions in Excel which handle these differently, even so they're more or less the same thing. There are some functions like in this yellow box which handle them in exactly the same way, for which it is completely the same. So no matter which data type you use, like the functions will interpret that as the same thing. So VLOOKUPs is a good example. If you look at a basic VLOOKUP, you might have seen VLOOKUPs before. If you use a VLOOKUP, then the very last value, again, I'm not going to go too much into details about what VLOOKUPs are today, but if you've used them, the very last value, some people put in a 0, some people put in a false. Either way, whether you put in 0 or false, it does the exact same thing. Again, like if you're putting in a 1 or true, it changes the behavior of the VLOOKUP, but it's exactly equivalent whether you're doing a 0 or false. So you can see in this particular VLOOKUP, it's saying A2, which has the value false, and when I put in enter, it gives me the exact same thing as if I'm using the same VLOOKUP saying A3, which is the value 0. So 0 or false are exactly the equivalent in VLOOKUPs. So if you're just using VLOOKUPs of similar functions to VLOOKUPs, then you don't really need to convert between the two data types because Excel will interpret that as exactly the same thing. But there are some functions, just to illustrate that, which handle these two differently. So you might have to use this conversion tab that we've seen in example 4 to convert between the two values so that these functions can handle that more appropriately. One of them is the sum function, for instance. Sum function will basically, it will ignore all the logical values. So whenever it hits false and true, the actual words, it will just ignore them completely. Whereas if it hits the values 0 and 1, then it will actually count, it will sum them together. So in this sum function, you can see that I've used all those, all the values I got from A2 to A5. So it's basically counting false plus 0 plus true plus 1. And we said that false and true are equivalent to the numbers 0 and 1. So technically, you might be expecting that false is the same as 0, so it might calculate 0 plus 0, which is 0, and then true is the same as 1. So you might think that because it's the same as 1, it's going to calculate 1 plus 1 at the end. So you might think that the result is 2, but as you can see, the result is actually 1, because even though true is equivalent to 1, the sum function will just ignore logical values. So it's really, really important sometimes to understand, when you need to use this conversion tab that I've had an example for, before you're using a sum function or equivalent functions, and when you can just leave it and the function will automatically handle the conversion like it does for VLOOKUPs. Then finally, you get some functions like the one we've got in this box, in this green box, number value. So again, don't worry too much what these functions mean. If you don't understand them, but it's just to illustrate that certain functions will actually completely not work if you're giving it one data type or the other. So the number value function can't handle logical values at all. So if you're trying to put a false or true directly into a number value function, then as you can see, it just breaks, it gives you an error, whereas it can work fine with numbers. So in this case, it's especially important that if we get false and true, we convert them before we start the function, because otherwise we're actually going to get errors in your spreadsheet, which is not ideal. So this might look a little bit technical, but it's just to illustrate how, one of these basic topics that you might even have used implicitly before in various functions, like I say, a lot of people use if functions, VLOOKUP functions, and even so, Boolean logic, the topic that we're talking about here, is at the core of these functions. A lot of people don't fully understand what they actually mean, how they work, and they subsequently don't understand that there are different functions that deal with these data types in different ways. So it is quite important to distinguish between them, to be able to convert them, and subsequently get the exact result that you want, rather than some errors or maybe some result that you didn't fully expect, like in a sum function. Brilliant. Don't think there are any questions so far from what I can see, so I'll just go to the final tab. Like I say, if you have any questions, just put them on the screen. If I can't answer all of them today, then we'll get back to you via email. But just to go through this final tab, the applications tab, it's just to give you an idea of the many different things that you can do with these Boolean functions. If you do find this topic a little bit abstract, it is worth spending a little bit of time on that, because and if there's more demand, we can go into more complexities. But it is really, like I say, at the core of pretty much most of the things that you do in Excel, even if you're not necessarily aware of it. So what we've got here is a very basic example. We've got different products that you can see here, and we've got different values in dollar for these products, then different values in pounds for these products. So this might just be one of the daily processes that you're looking at every day. You've got maybe these products change on a daily basis, maybe you're updating some values every day, and then there's a very basic function here that, we've just taken an arbitrary exchange rate and basically multiplied the dollar value that you see here with some arbitrary exchange rate to get a pound value. So this might be something that you're doing every day. You're copying on a new exchange rate. You're trying to calculate something that gives you a different currency. So whatever your process might be, it's very, very important that when you're doing your daily process or weekly process, that you're checking this sometimes, that you're making some quality controls, and different people do that in different ways. Some people talk about that as flags or as overall checks like we have here. But whatever you're using to control these normally, Boolean functions are usually one of the easiest and best ways. So what we've done today, this topic is usually one of the easiest ways to make sure that there are no errors in your data, that all the formulas have worked properly. So any quality control that you want to do, Boolean functions tend to be by far the easiest answer to check whether something has worked correctly or whether it hasn't worked correctly. And there's just a couple of examples. Again, these aren't exclusive in any way, but it's basically, and you might not know these, when you're starting to design a spreadsheet, but every time you have a near miss or every time something goes wrong in your process, one of the first things you might do is just analyze how has that gone wrong, what has gone wrong, and what can we do in the future to improve on that, to make that better. And again, using these Boolean functions, you can just come up with more and more tests that then identify when something goes wrong. So you don't, do something wrong for 5 weeks and then the customer complains, but instead the spreadsheet is flagging up something has gone missing, something has gone wrong, and you can fix it as and when it happens before the damage is done. So there's a couple of example spreadsheets, controls here. You might use some different ones. But one of them, that you can use is check for blanks, for instance. So all I'm doing here is I'm going through the list via formula, through the list of products, and I'm just checking whether all of these actually contain entries. If this is something that you're copying and pasting every day, or you're entering that manually yourself, it's very, very easy. Like you can see in this example in A14, it's very easy to sometimes miss out one, have a blank cell. That's almost never desirable when you have a list like this. For various reasons, like you might struggle sorting, filtering, but also it's usually a very good indication that there's some sort of an issue. Someone's forgot to update something. So rather than having to scroll through all of these every day, you might just want to come up with a check that basically checks whether every single cell contains a value or not. Unfortunately, you can't, you can, but there's the easiest way to check for something like that is to check for blanks. So rather than checking whether something contains a value or not, you're checking whether the cell itself is blank or not. If it's not blank, then it means that it's got a value in it. And the way you're doing this is with the isBlank formula. And the isBlank formula is just one of the many formulas that you can use, again, which uses true and false as the very basis of its operations. So it's saying is blank A7, and what that means is it's just checking whether A7 is blank, like it says. If A7 is blank, then it's going to say true. If it's not blank, then it's going to say false. So if I just wrote is blank A7 into the cell, tracked it down, we would get different values of false and true, depending on whether the cell is false or not. However, what I actually want to check here is I don't want to just check whether it's blank. I want to check the opposite. I want to check whether it's got a value. So I want to change it slightly. I want to say when it's got a value, then I want to say true. When it's not got a value, I want to say false. So instead of saying is blank, I want to actually check the exact opposite. So I'm using the not function we saw earlier to change it around. So I'm getting the exact opposite. When the isBlank function returns true, then I want to say false. When the isBlank function returns false, I want to say true. So it's giving me the exact opposite of what I've got on the screen here. So using the not function around it, it's just going to give me true whenever there's a value and false whenever there's no value. And then you might notice I've used a double negative initially before I'm even starting this function, which then converts the true into a 1 and the false into a 0. And the reason I'm doing that is because it becomes mathematically easier to deal with values, with numbers, rather than with having to deal with true and false, because we can use things like the sum function, the product function, and so on, which will just ignore the trues and the false like we saw earlier, but it will actually do count the numbers. So using this double negative, I've counted them together. What you can then do as well is you can use some conditional formatting. If you haven't seen conditional formatting before, again, we provide these on the courses that we have across the UK. But just to give you a basic idea, conditional formatting will flag certain values or certain entries based on the condition that you set by a color. So anything that you can come up with via color, you can set some basic condition and say, if something is greater than another value, if something is smaller than another value, I'm going to make it green or yellow or red or whatever it is. In this particular case, I've said if I'm going through this list of entries and I get the value 0 at any point, then I'm going to make that red just to flag it up as an issue. If it's not red, then if it's not 1, then I'm going to sorry, if it's not 0, then I'm just going to leave it as it is. So if it's 0, then I'm going to make it red. If it's not 0, then I'm going to leave it as it is. So I'm not going to change it in any way. And doing this, you can see, setting up controls like that, I could literally just scroll through my data and can immediately point at my issue and saying, this is where my issue occurs, and then immediately it points you to the right direction. So it must be somewhere on this row. So I can immediately see here that's where my blank cell is. So using conditional formatting and these Boolean logic values, you can build some very clever and easy controls that not only tell you that there is an issue, but they tell you exactly the location of the issue so that you can investigate that further. Even conditional formatting itself, again, uses Boolean logic. So when you're setting up this conditional formatting, you again need to know what true and false is and how to manipulate them, because the conditional formatting will only ever work if the statement that you're making is true. So only like the condition that you're setting has to be true, otherwise the conditional formatting won't work. So again, Boolean logic really sits at the core of most of the things that Excel does. Even better than just scrolling through this entire list, I've got an overall check on top, which is a product function, or product function basically multiplies all the different values together that you see in this range. So it's saying I'm going from E7 all the way down to E41, and I'm multiplying every single value together. So what it's essentially doing is it's taking A7, then A8, then A9, and it's multiplying them all. So it's going 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. So every one of these values is 1. So 1 times 1 times 1 and so on is always going to be 1. So this overall product function will become 1 as long as all the values in my list are 1. But the moment at least one of them are 0, then this overall product function will become 0. So it's again a really, really easy, clever trick to deal with multiple Boolean values that you're getting. If you've got a whole list of 1s and you want to check whether they all say 1 or one of them might say 0, then using a product function can combine all of these together, and it can say, only if all of these are 1 will this check be true overall, in which case I don't need to even scroll down, because if this says 1, then I can be confident that there's no issues in my column. But the moment it says 0, then it's flagging up to me that I need to scroll through that list. So it might not seem that exciting, with the small example that I've got here, but imagine you've got 10,000 rows of data, then this overall check would basically give you at one glance, do I even have to look at the quality control at all, or can I just leave it because it's saying 1, which means everything is okay? So you can set up, different levels of quality controls, the quality controls that tell you whether there's an issue in the first place, and then once you've identified the fact that there is an issue, you can have a subsequent quality control that then tells you exactly where that issue is. And all of this, once again, just works with Boolean logic. So this topic, even though it's just an introduction, hopefully gives you an idea how useful that is and how quickly you can, apply that to make some real improvements to your spreadsheets. So all of these checks that I've got here, work pretty much the same way. Just to give you a few additional examples, check for errors. You've got the same idea again, same function, but this time I'm using an is_error function. So this time I'm going through the list and I'm checking whether any of the values potentially say error. So sometimes you get these NA values or value errors or divided by 0 errors. Any of these I can check with this function. So again, that's a really, really useful way to check whether there might be any errors in your spreadsheet, which is really good. And you can see the overall check says there is an issue. I can't see any issue on the screen at the moment, but as I'm scrolling down the list, you can see, okay, there's an issue in this line. Then investigating this, highlighting the same line, you can then see, okay, there's an NA error. happening in my data at this point. So really these quality controls, even so they're very, very basic, they can give you very, very quick and good analysis exactly where you need to draw your attention to. Check for formulas. Again, there's an is formula function. So these are just some basic ideas of how you could build your quality controls, but you can build many, many more. And they're not gonna, unless you make them really complicated, they're not gonna slow down your spreadsheet. They're not gonna change anything around. You can have them in a tab. You never need to look at this tab unless there's an issue being flagged up to you. So it's something that will almost make any spreadsheet better the moment you add a tab like this to it. In this case, it's saying my overall check is fine. All of these must say 1 because my overall check is saying 1, so there can't be any issue in this particular entry. So is formula checks whether my value in C7 contains a formula. So if you're setting up any formulas, it's sometimes quite easy to miss one. Maybe someone's manually entered a value, maybe someone deleted a value. So if I accidentally delete a value here, you can see immediately that's being flagged up and saying, hang on, someone's forgot to track down the formula or someone's made a mistake. The moment I track this down again, it disappears again. So you can see how quickly it identifies that, how quickly it makes you aware of any problems in your spreadsheet just using these Boolean functions. And then finally, this is just a personal check I've made just for this particular data. All of these products are priced at a certain price. So, one of the things that you might identify via near miss is that for some reason someone's entered a negative value. Obviously, that can be the true, that can be true because we're all selling these products at a certain price, so there can only be positive values. So the fact that one of them would be negative would be again an indication that something's gone wrong in the process. So really, anything that you can come up with, you can check for that specifically. So what I've done here is I've checked whether C7 is greater than 0. And that whether the value in C7, the pound value that we're getting, is greater than C0, and then I've just tracked that down, and again I've put a double negative in front to convert that to numbers. Tracking that down, you can see something is not quite right here, and that's probably a direct result of the fact that I've got some sort of a formula error here. So some of these checks can be solved independently of each other, but some of these are actually connected to that as well. So chances are if I fix this first error, the second error will disappear as well. So again, these are just some basic ideas of how you can make some very, very real improvements in your spreadsheet. So this is all to do with quality control, making things better, making things more efficient. What you can also do, and this is just a slide, like don't panic when you see this formula, but this is just a slight introduction into what else is out there. The moment you understand this well, you can do some additional functionalities in Excel where you can use Boolean logic to create some amazing functions that do a lot for you. So for instance, you might know that when you've got some data such as this, you can use the very basic sorting functions. If you click on data, you can sort it A to Z, Z to A, and a lot of people do this manually all the time. You manually sort data. You're getting some customer to send you some data through, and they always send it in some stupid form, and then you have to manually sort it, which might only take a few seconds, but it's quite annoying to have to having to press that button every time. But there are ways for formulas to automatically sort your data so that you are only setting up a certain formula, and then it automatically looks at all of this data and sorts it like we're done here. So you can see my list here is just sorted alphabetically, but I've not sorted it. I've done a very I've created a function that does that for me. To do something like that is very complicated. You have to use array functions, which again is something that we teach in more advanced courses. You can see how crazy the formula looks. Don't worry too much about how this works and what that means today, but it's just again to give you an idea of how useful these are, because even for very, very complex formulas like that, Boolean logic is one of the core fundamental things that happen. You can see the smaller sign up here a couple of times in that formula, so that that is clearly a case where Boolean logic is being applied. But there are different areas in this formula where Boolean logic is implicitly being used without people necessarily realizing it. So, like I say, the moment you understand this topic very well, you can do some very, very advanced stuff with it. Where, like in this example, where it just automatically sorts the data top to bottom. And you never have to do that again. You just paste in the data from that moment onwards, and it gets gets automatically sorted. Brilliant. Do you guys have any questions? I mean, that pretty much takes us to the end of the course. If you do have any questions, at the end, just write it in that question box. But like I say, that's just the end of the course, just a small introduction into Boolean logic. Hopefully that was valuable to you. It can be a bit abstract, so don't worry if you didn't understand all of that at the very first time. You can look at that example spreadsheet in more detail if you have some time, and just go over the webinar again and pause it at various stages. But hopefully that gives you an idea of how useful these are. And like I say, even advanced users, very, very good Excel users, usually don't have a very good understanding of how these Boolean values work, even though they're at the core of what most functions do. So if you understand this well, it really puts you in a different category of Excel users. You can start manipulating almost any function and get complete different answers out of your spreadsheet, as well as making things much better and easier to understand. Great. So I don't think there seem to be any questions at the moment. So if that's fine for everyone, then we'll just stop the recording at this point. I hope you have a very nice Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll do some new webinar courses again in the new year. So yeah, thanks very much for attending, and I hope this was useful for you all.